What if the people responsible for protecting truth were the ones trying to silence it? What if justice was decided before the trial even began, and the outcome was already set? And what if the one who had every right to defend himself chose silence instead? They took Jesus away from the garden, the night still thick with tension. The sound of footsteps echoed as he was led into the city, not as a teacher surrounded by followers, but as a prisoner surrounded by guards. He was brought to the high priest. This was not just any place. This was the center of religious authority. The place where truth was supposed to be upheld. The place where judgment was meant to be fair, careful, and guided by the law. But something was already wrong. The chief priests, the elders, the teachers of the law, all had gathered, not to seek truth, but to confirm a decision they had already made. They were looking for evidence, not to understand, but to accuse, not to listen, but to condemn. Many came forward with testimonies, voices filled the room, claims, accusations, stories, but none of them matched. Their words contradicted each other. Their statements fell apart under their own weight. Because when truth is absent, consistency disappears. Even in their effort to build a case, they couldn't create something solid enough to stand on. Still, they kept trying. Finally, some stood up and said, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another, not made with hands.'" It sounded serious, dangerous, threatening. But even then, their testimony didn't align. It wasn't accurate, it wasn't complete, it wasn't truth. The room must have felt chaotic, frustrated, tense, because they had a goal but no clear path to reach it. So the high priest stood up, direct, focused. He looked at Jesus and asked, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" All eyes turned, waiting, expecting. This was the moment, the opportunity for Jesus to defend himself, to correct the lies, to explain the truth, to speak. But he remained silent. No defense, no argument, no attempt to prove himself, just silence. That kind of silence is powerful because it refuses to participate in something unjust. It doesn't play by the rules of a broken system. It stands without needing to prove anything. But the high priest pressed further. Again he asked, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" This was different. This wasn't about false witnesses anymore. This was direct, personal, a question of identity. And this time, Jesus answered, "I am." 2 simple words, but filled with meaning, filled with truth, filled with authority. "And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." This was not just an answer. It was a declaration, a revelation, a statement of who he truly was. And it changed everything. The high priest tore his clothes, a dramatic act, a sign of outrage, but also a signal. "We don't need any more witnesses," he said. "You have heard the blasphemy, what do you think?" And they all condemned him, worthy of death. Just like that. No fair trial, no real investigation, no justice. The decision was made, not because of evidence, but because of truth they refused to accept. And then it became physical. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him, to strike him with their fists. "Prophesy," they mocked. "Tell us who hit you." The guards took him and beat him. The scene shifted from courtroom to cruelty, from accusation to humiliation, from words to violence. This is what happens when power is threatened, when truth confronts control. When authority feels exposed, it reacts, not with humility, but with force. And yet Jesus remained. He didn't fight back. He didn't defend himself. He didn't call for justice. Why? Because this moment was never about proving innocence. It was about fulfilling purpose. Because the truth is, Jesus was not on trial. The system was, the leaders were, humanity was. Their response revealed more about them than about him. Because when truth stands in front of us, we either receive it or reject it. And rejection often comes with resistance, anger, denial, even violence. Not because truth is weak, but because it's too strong to ignore. Jesus didn't need to prove who he was. He knew, and that was enough. There's something deeply challenging about that, because we live in a world where we feel the need to defend ourselves, to explain, to justify, to prove our worth, to respond to every accusation, every misunderstanding, every false claim. But Jesus shows a different way. A strength that doesn't depend on being understood, a confidence that doesn't require approval, a truth that stands even when it's rejected. That doesn't mean silence is always the answer. But it means we don't have to fight every battle. We don't have to respond to every voice. We don't have to prove ourselves to those who have already decided not to listen. Because sometimes, silence is not weakness, it's clarity, it's peace, it's trust. Trust that truth doesn't need to shout to be real. Trust that identity doesn't need validation to exist. Trust that purpose continues, even when misunderstood. But there's also a warning in this story, because it's easy to point at the leaders and say they were wrong, and they were. But the deeper question is, where do we stand? Because sometimes we resist truth too. Not in obvious ways, but in quiet ones, when it challenges our comfort, when it disrupts our plans, when it calls us to change. Truth is not always easy to accept, especially when it requires something from us: surrender, humility, transformation. And when faced with that, we have a choice. Do we listen, or do we look for reasons to dismiss it? The leaders had truth standing right in front of them, and they rejected it. Not because they didn't see it, but because they didn't want it. That's the danger. Not ignorance, but resistance. And that's why this moment matters. Because it invites us to reflect, to be honest, to ask ourselves, am I open to truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges me, even when it doesn't fit what I expected? Because following Jesus is not just about believing what is easy, it's about receiving what is real. Even when it costs something, even when it changes everything. Jesus stood in that room, accused, mocked, condemned. And still, he didn't lose who he was. He didn't lose his purpose. He didn't lose his peace. Because his identity wasn't defined by their words. And yours isn't either. People may misunderstand you, misjudge you, even reject you. But that doesn't change who you are. Not if your identity is rooted in something deeper, something unshakable, something eternal. Jesus didn't fight to be recognized, he simply remained who he was. And that changed the world. Because truth doesn't need to win arguments, it changes hearts. Quietly, powerfully, over time. And even in that moment of rejection, something greater was unfolding. Because the path didn't end in that room, it continued toward the cross, toward sacrifice, toward redemption. What looked like defeat was actually the beginning of victory. And that's the paradox, that's the mystery, that's the power of this story. Because sometimes the moments that look like loss are the ones that lead to the greatest purpose. So if you find yourself in a place where you feel misunderstood, unseen, unheard, remember this moment. Remember the silence. Remember the strength. Remember the truth that doesn't need approval to stand. And trust that what is real will endure. Thank you for watching this video. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.